At a family holiday party, my parents introduced me as the cleaning help in front of a wealthy CEO they wanted to impress. Everyone laughed until the CEO revealed who I really was. In one moment, the truth shattered their image and exposed everything they never saw in me. The Sterling family holiday gathering was an annual ritual of performance and pretense, a carefully orchestrated display of unity and success that bore almost no resemblance to our actual dynamics. Every December, my parents transformed their suburban home into a winter wonderland of twinkling lights and expensive decorations, invited everyone who mattered and everyone they wanted to impress, and spent the entire evening performing the role of the perfect family. I had been attending these gatherings for 32 years, and in all that time, I had never once felt like I belonged. My name is Alex Sterling, and I am the youngest of two sons. My brother, Derek, is 4 years older than me, and from the moment we were born, the trajectory of our lives was set. But I still showed up for every holiday gathering. I still helped with the preparations, fixed whatever was broken, smiled through the subtle and not-so-subtle dismissals. I did it because some part of me still hoped that one day they might see me. One day, they might be proud. That day never came. This year's gathering was supposed to be special. My father, Richard Sterling, had been talking about it for weeks. A potential business partner, no, more than a partner, a potential investor, was going to attend. Harold Harrison, the CEO of Harrison Industries, a man worth more money than most people could imagine, had agreed to come to our holiday party. My father was desperate. His small manufacturing business had been struggling for years, bleeding money that he kept trying to replace with loans and investments that never quite materialized. Derek, who had been brought into the business after failing at everything else, was supposed to be the savior, but had only made things worse. The company was on the verge of collapse, and Harold Harrison was their last hope. I knew all of this because my mother had called me 3 times in the week leading up to the party, each time with a list of tasks. Fix the lighting in the living room. Repair the sound system. Make sure the smart home features were working properly. Set up the extra tables and chairs. And for God's sake, dress appropriately. Not like you usually do, but something that won't embarrass us. I had done everything they asked. I had taken time off work, driven 2 hours to their house, and spent 3 days preparing for an event where I would be, as always, invisible. I fixed the lighting, repaired the sound system, configured the smart home features, and set up the extra tables and chairs. I bought a new blazer, the kind they would consider appropriate, and packed it carefully for the party. And on the night of the gathering, I stood in the corner of their living room, holding a glass of sparkling water, watching the performance unfold. Harold Harrison arrived at 7 p.m. precisely, accompanied by his wife, an elegant woman in a simple black dress. He was shorter than I expected, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a smile that seemed genuine but carefully controlled. My father practically vibrated with nervous energy as he greeted them, ushering them inside, offering drinks and appetizers with the desperate enthusiasm of a man whose entire future rested on this encounter. Derek was there, of course, dressed in an expensive suit that our parents had probably bought for him. He shook Harold's hand with practiced confidence, made small talk about the market, the economy, the challenges of manufacturing in the current climate. I watched from my corner, sipping my water, and I could see that Harold was not impressed. He was polite, attentive, but his eyes had that distant quality of someone who has heard the same pitch 1,000 times and knows exactly where it's going. My mother circulated among the other guests, playing the perfect hostess, her smile fixed and bright. She glanced at me occasionally, checking that I wasn't doing anything to embarrass them, then looked away satisfied that I was staying in my designated corner. I had been in that corner for 2 hours when my father's voice cut through the noise. "Alex, come here." I looked up, surprised. My father never summoned me. He usually forgot I existed until something broke. But he was standing with Harold Harrison, gesturing for me to join them. I set down my water and walked over, my heart beating slightly faster. "Harold, this is..." My father paused, and I saw a flicker of something cross his face. Calculation. He was deciding how to present me. "This is Alex," he continued, and I waited for the word son. It didn't come. He's basically the cleaning help around here. Keeps the place running, fixes things when they break. He laughed, a forced, nervous sound. "We'd be lost without him, wouldn't we?" My mother appeared at his side, her smile widening as she caught the tail end of his introduction. "We let him stick around out of charity," she added, her voice dripping with false warmth. "He's handy with chores. Always has been. Not everyone can be a businessman like Derek, but everyone has their place." She laughed, and my father laughed with her. A few nearby guests joined in, uncertain but following the lead. I stood there, frozen, feeling the familiar heat of humiliation spread through my chest. I looked at Harold Harrison. His smile had vanished. His eyes, which had been politely distant throughout the evening, were now fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "Interesting," he said, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. The laughter around us died instantly. Harold turned to my father, and when he spoke, his voice was cold. "You introduced this man as your cleaning help. You said you keep him around out of charity." My father's smile faltered. "Well, I didn't mean. He's family, of course, but he's always been the practical one, the one who helps out. Let me ask you something." Harold cut him off, his eyes still on me. "Do you know who this is?" My father blinked. "He's my son, Alex." "Yes, I gathered that." Harold's voice was ice. "But do you know who he is?" The silence in the room was absolute. Every guest had stopped talking, every eye was on us. My mother's face had gone pale. Derek was staring, confused, trying to understand what was happening. "I don't," my father started. "Let me enlighten you." Harold stepped closer to me, and for the first time, I saw something like respect in his eyes. "Alex Sterling is the founder and CTO of Nexus Solutions. He is the architect behind the logistics software that my company has been using for the past 3 years, software that has saved us millions of dollars and increased our efficiency by 40%. The words landed like bombs. I heard gasps from the guests, saw my mother's face drain of color, watched Derek's jaw drop open. "I have been trying to meet with Alex for 6 months, Harold continued. "My assistant has sent countless emails requesting a consultation, a meeting, any opportunity to discuss further collaboration. And he has been too busy to respond. Because, as I now understand, he's been here, fixing your lighting and setting up your tables." He turned back to my parents, and his voice hardened. "You called him your cleaning help. You said you keep him around out of charity. This man who has built a company worth more than your entire business could ever dream of being, is not your cleaning help. He is one of the most innovative minds in the logistics technology sector, and you have no idea who he is." My mother's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. My father looked like he had been physically struck. The guests were whispering now, the sound spreading through the room like fire. Harold turned to me, and his expression softened. "Alex, I apologize for the intrusion into your family's private matters. But when I heard how they were speaking about you, I couldn't remain silent. You deserve better." I found my voice, though it came out rougher than I intended. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Please, call me Harold." He extended his hand, and I shook it. "And when you have a moment, I would very much like to discuss that meeting my assistant has been requesting." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Around us, the room was in chaos. My mother was crying. Real tears, not the performative ones she usually deployed. My father was sputtering, trying to find words that wouldn't come. Derek had backed away, his face a mask of shock and something that might have been fear. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at Harold, at the respect in his eyes, at the recognition I had never received from my own family. "I'll make time," I said. "Next week. Your assistant can coordinate with mine." Harold smiled, a genuine smile this time. "I look forward to it." He turned to his wife, murmured something, and they began making their way toward the door. The party was effectively over. Guests were gathering their coats, exchanging whispered comments, casting glances at my parents that ranged from pity to contempt. I stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the wreckage of my family's carefully constructed facade. My mother was sobbing now, ugly sounds that she couldn't control. My father was staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. "Alex," he said, his voice cracking. "I didn't know. I didn't. No." I cut him off, my voice calm but firm. "You didn't know? You never knew. You never asked. Please, let's just talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about." I looked around the room, at the decorations I had hung, the lights I had fixed, the tables I had set up. "I'm leaving now. I have a company to run." I walked out of that house and didn't look back. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember getting on the highway, don't remember the 2 hours it took to reach my apartment. I remember pulling into my parking spot, turning off the engine, and sitting in the dark for a long time, trying to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed incessantly. Calls from my mother, my father, Derek. Texts from relatives who had been at the party, expressing shock, offering support, asking for details. I ignored them all. I went upstairs, poured myself a glass of whiskey, and sat on my balcony, looking out at the city lights. And slowly, the reality of the situation began to sink in. I had been invisible to my family for 32 years. They had dismissed me, diminished me, treated me as the help. And in one moment, in front of everyone who mattered to them, that illusion had been shattered. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. The exhaustion of a lifetime of being unseen, of performing gratitude for scraps, of pretending that their neglect didn't wound me. I finished my whiskey and went to bed. I slept for 12 hours. The next morning, I woke to a barrage of messages. The most urgent was from my assistant, Lena, informing me that Harold Harrison's office had called to schedule a meeting. I responded with a date and time, then scrolled through the rest. My mother had left 7 voicemails. I listened to the first one. "Alex, it's Mom. Please call me. We need to talk about last night. I know we said some things. But you have to understand, we didn't know. You never told us." I deleted it without listening to the others. My father had sent a text. "We need to meet. This is important. Please don't shut us out." Derek had sent a message that was almost comical in its self-absorption. "Dude, why didn't you tell us you were rich? We could have been partners." I blocked them all. The meeting with Harold Harrison took place the following week. It was productive, professional, exactly the kind of business interaction I excelled at. We discussed potential collaborations, partnership opportunities, the future of logistics technology. He was impressed by my vision, and I was impressed by his willingness to innovate. At the end of the meeting, as we were shaking hands, he paused. "Alex, I want to apologize again for the other night. I didn't mean to create a scene, but I couldn't stand by and listen to them talk about you that way. You didn't create the scene. They did." I released his hand. "I've been invisible to them my entire life. You just made them see." He nodded slowly. "What will you do now?" "I'll keep doing what I've always done. Building my company, living my life." "They're not part of it." "And your mother? Your father?" I considered the question. They had 32 years to be my family. They chose not to. That's on them, not me. Harold studied me for a long moment. "You're remarkable, Alex. Not because of your success, but because of who you are. Don't let anyone make you forget that." I didn't. The weeks that followed were a strange mixture of professional triumph and personal chaos. My company continued to grow, attracting new clients and investment. The meeting with Harold led to a partnership that opened doors I hadn't even known existed. I was featured in industry publications, invited to speak at conferences, recognized as a leader in my field. And through it all, my family tried desperately to reach me. They showed up at my office, only to be turned away by security. They called my assistant so many times that she had to change her number. They sent letters, emails, messages through relatives, each one more desperate than the last. My mother's letters were the most painful. She wrote about my childhood, about memories she claimed to cherish, about the love she insisted she had always felt. She apologized, repeatedly, for the things she had said at the party. But she never acknowledged the decades of neglect that had preceded it. She never understood that the problem wasn't one night of humiliation. It was a lifetime of invisibility. My father's approach was more practical. He wanted to talk business, to explore ways that my success could benefit the family. He offered to bring me into the family business, the business that was now on the verge of bankruptcy, as a partner, as if that was something I would ever want. He didn't seem to understand that his business meant nothing to me, that I had built something far more valuable on my own. Derek's messages were the easiest to ignore. They were filled with entitlement and resentment, demands that I share my wealth, accusations that I had been hiding my success to make him look bad. He couldn't see past his own ego to understand that his failures had nothing to do with me. I ignored them all. I built walls around my life, protected my peace, focused on the work that fulfilled me. I had friends, colleagues, a community of people who saw me and valued me. I didn't need my family's approval, and I was no longer willing to tolerate their presence. But I couldn't escape them entirely. 6 months after the holiday party, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. I heard the news from a cousin, who called me with tears in her voice. It was serious, she said. Advanced. The prognosis was not good. I sat with the information for a long time, trying to feel something. I expected grief, or guilt, or the familiar pull of obligation. Instead, I felt nothing. Just a vast, empty calm. I didn't visit her. I didn't call. I sent no flowers, no cards, no messages of support. I simply continued with my life, as if nothing had happened. Some people might call that cruel. They might say that a mother's illness should transcend past grievances, that family obligations don't disappear just because we've been hurt. But those people haven't lived my life. They haven't spent 32 years being invisible, being dismissed, being told that they only mattered when they were useful. I had made peace with my choice. My mother had chosen, every day for 3 decades, to treat me as less than. She didn't get to erase that history with a diagnosis. She died 8 months later. I didn't attend the funeral. My father called me afterward, his voice broken in ways I had never heard. She asked for you, he said. At the end, she kept asking where you were. I didn't respond. I know you're angry. I know we failed you. But she was your mother, Alex. She loved you in her own way. Her own way wasn't enough. I kept my voice calm, steady. I'm sorry she's gone. I'm sorry you're hurting. But I'm not going to pretend that her death changes anything. She's gone, Alex. Forever. Doesn't that mean anything? It means she's at peace. It means she doesn't have to live with the consequences of her choices anymore. But I do. And I've made mine. He didn't understand. He would never understand. Some chasms are too wide to bridge, some wounds too deep to heal. The best we could do was acknowledge the distance and stop pretending it didn't exist. After my mother's funeral, the family scattered. Derek moved to another state, chasing opportunities that never materialized. My father sold the struggling business and retreated into a quiet retirement, filled with regret and loneliness. The cousins and aunts and uncles who had witnessed my humiliation at the holiday party gradually faded from my life, unsure how to navigate the new reality. I continued to build my company. I continued to grow, to succeed, to thrive. I found a partner, a woman named Sarah who saw me clearly and loved me completely. We married quietly, without family, and built a life together that was filled with laughter and trust and the simple joy of being seen. My father reached out occasionally, sending birthday cards and Christmas greetings. I responded politely, keeping the connection alive but distant. We never talked about the past, never addressed the wounds that remained. It was easier that way. 10 years after that fateful holiday party, I received a letter from my father. He was dying, he wrote. His heart was failing, and he didn't have long. He wanted to see me one last time. I debated for days whether to go. Sarah encouraged me, gently, to make peace if I could. Not for him, she said, but for myself. To close the circle, I flew to his small apartment in Florida, the place he had retreated to after my mother's death. He was thinner than I remembered, frilier, his eyes clouded with age and regret. But when he saw me, they lit up with something that might have been hope. Alex. His voice was weak, but the word was clear. Thank you for coming. I sat in the chair beside his bed. You asked me to. I know I don't deserve it. He paused, gathering his strength. I've had a lot of time to think, to reflect on the choices I made, the way I treated you. I was wrong, Alex. So wrong. About everything. I didn't respond. I just listened. Your mother and I, we had this idea of what our family would be. Derek was supposed to be the success, the one who carried on my legacy. And when you didn't fit that mold, we just set you aside. We convinced ourselves that you didn't need us, that you were fine on your own. It was easier than admitting that we were failing you. He coughed, a harsh, rattling sound. But you weren't fine. You were a child who needed his parents, and we weren't there. You were a young man who needed support, and we gave you nothing. And somehow, despite everything, you became something remarkable. You built an empire, found love, created a life that most people only dream of. Not because of us, but despite us. He reached out and took my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. I'm proud of you, Alex. I should have said it 1,000 times. But I'm saying it now. I'm proud of you. I looked at this man, my father, who had failed me in every way a parent could fail. I felt no anger, no resentment, no desire for revenge. I simply felt distance. The distance of years, of choices made, of a life lived on my own terms. Thank you, I said, for saying that. Is that all? Can you forgive me? I considered the question. Forgiveness wasn't a switch to flip, a debt to be canceled. It was a process, a journey, a choice made and remade every day. I had been on that journey for a long time, and I was closer to the end than the beginning. I forgive you, I said. Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger was poisoning me. I've let it go. You should too. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. Thank you. I stayed with him for 3 days, sitting by his bed, talking about nothing and everything. We didn't try to bridge the chasm of decades. It was too wide, too deep. But we found a way to coexist, to share space without reopening wounds. It was enough. He died on the 3rd night, peacefully, in his sleep. I was there when he went, holding his hand, watching the life fade from his eyes. I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, no grief. Just a quiet acceptance of the natural order of things. I arranged for his funeral, contacted the few relatives who might want to attend, handled the practical details of death. It was the least I could do, and more than he deserved, but I did it anyway. Not for him, for me. To prove that I could, that I was capable of grace even when it wasn't required. The funeral was small, a handful of people who had known him in his final years. Derek didn't come. He was in rehab somewhere, dealing with his own demons. The cousins and aunts who had witnessed my humiliation years ago sent flowers, but stayed away. It was just me, a few neighbors, and the hospice nurse who had cared for him. I stood at the grave as they lowered his casket, and I thought about the strange, sad arc of our relationship. He had been a stranger to me for most of my life, a distant figure who occupied the role of father without ever fulfilling its responsibilities. And now he was gone, and I was here, the only family member present, fulfilling duties he had never earned. Life is strange that way. After the funeral, I returned to my life. My company continued to thrive. My marriage continued to deepen. My days continued to unfold in the quiet rhythm of contentment. I thought about my parents occasionally, but the thoughts no longer carried weight. They were simply facts, historical data, artifacts of a past that no longer defined me. I had become someone else, someone whole. 10 years later, I received an invitation to a family reunion. It was organized by a cousin I barely remembered, someone who had been a child at that fateful holiday party and was now an adult trying to reconnect the scattered remnants of our family. The invitation was warm, inclusive, careful to acknowledge the complexities of our history. I debated whether to go. Sarah encouraged me, as she always did, to follow my heart. And my heart, after much consideration, said yes. The reunion was held at a rented lodge in the mountains, a neutral space far from the sites of old wounds. About 20 people attended. Cousins, their children, a few elderly aunts who remembered me as a child. Derek didn't come. He was in another state, still struggling, still lost. I arrived on a Friday afternoon, nervous in a way I hadn't anticipated. Sarah squeezed my hand as we walked in, her presence steady and grounding. The first person I saw was my cousin Emily, who had been a teenager at that holiday party. She ran to me, wrapped me in a hug, and whispered, "I'm so glad you came." The weekend was strange and wonderful. I reconnected with relatives I hadn't seen in decades, learned about their lives, shared stories of my own. No one mentioned the party, the humiliation, the years of estrangement. We focused on the present, on the connections that remained, on the possibility of building something new. On the last night, as we sat around a fire, Emily turned to me. "Alex, I want to apologize for what happened at that party, for not speaking up, for not defending you. I was young and scared, but that's not an excuse. I should have said something." I looked at her, this woman who had been a child when her parents taught her to be complicit in my erasure. "You don't need to apologize. You were a kid. The responsibility wasn't yours. It felt like it was. It felt like we all failed you. Maybe you did. But that's in the past. What matters is now." I smiled, genuine and warm. "And now you're here. We're here. That's enough." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Alex." We sat in silence, watching the fire, and I thought about the long, winding path that had brought me here. The years of invisibility, the moment of public humiliation, the slow and painful reconstruction of my sense of self. The success I had built, the love I had found, the peace I had earned. I had not forgiven my parents in the way people expect, with tears and embraces and the erasure of the past. But I had released them. I had let them go, and in doing so, I had freed myself. The next morning, as we packed to leave, Emily handed me a small box. This was your mother's. She left it with my mom years ago, asking her to give it to you someday. We forgot about it until recently. I opened the box. Inside was a photograph, me, at maybe 5 years old, holding a toy I had fixed with my own hands. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, Alex, always fixing things. So proud of him. I stared at the photograph for a long time. It was the only evidence I had ever seen that my mother had felt any pride in me at all. I tucked it carefully into my pocket and carried it home. Today, I am 57 years old. My company has been sold, my retirement secured, my legacy established. I live in a house by the ocean with Sarah, our 2 dogs, and a garden that I tend with the same patient attention I once brought to software development. The photograph of 5-year-old me hangs on my wall, a reminder of the child I was and the man I became. I look at it sometimes and think about my mother, about her complicated love, about the pride she felt but never expressed. I don't know if she would recognize the person I have become. I don't know if she would be proud of me now. But I am proud of me. And that, I have learned, is what matters. My relationship with the rest of my family remains what it is, distant but not hostile, connected by blood but not by choice. We exchange cards at holidays, occasional messages, the minimal courtesies of people who share DNA but not lives. It is enough. Derek died 5 years ago, his body finally giving out after decades of abuse. I attended his funeral, stood in the back, watched the few people who had gathered say their goodbyes. I felt nothing but a quiet sadness for the life he could have lived, the person he could have become. He had been the golden child, and it had destroyed him. Sometimes I think about that holiday party, the moment when Harold Harrison spoke my name and changed everything. I think about the look on my parents' faces, the shock and shame and dawning realization. I think about the years that followed, the estrangement and the reconciliation and the slow, painful work of healing. And I think about the cleaning help, the label they gave me, the role they assigned, the box they tried to put me in. They meant it as an insult, a dismissal, a way of keeping me in my place. But it became something else entirely. Because the cleaning help sees everything. The cleaning help knows where the dirt is, where the cracks are, where the carefully constructed facades hide the rot beneath. The cleaning help is invisible, and invisibility is a superpower. I had been invisible to my family for 32 years. I had watched them, learned them, understood them in ways they never understood themselves. And when the moment came, I was ready. Not for revenge, not for vindication, simply for the truth. And the truth set me free. I walk on the beach every morning, watching the waves roll in and out, endless and eternal. Sarah walks with me sometimes, holding my hand, her presence a comfort and a joy. The dogs run ahead, chasing seagulls, living entirely in the moment. I am happy, not because my family finally saw me, not because I proved them wrong, not because I achieved success beyond their imagination. I am happy because I learned to see myself. I learned to value myself. I learned that my worth was never contingent on their approval. The cleaning help built an empire. The invisible son became visible. The afterthought became the main character in his own story. And that story is not over. Last week, I received a letter from my cousin Emily. She's organizing another reunion, she wrote, and she hopes I'll come. She also included a note from her daughter, a 16-year-old girl I've never met, who wants to interview me for a school project about successful entrepreneurs. I'm going to go. I'm going to meet this girl, tell her my story, answer her questions. I'm going to show her that success is not about where you start, but about where you choose to go. I'm going to be the mentor I never had. And maybe, in doing so, I'll continue the work of healing, not just for myself, but for the next generation. The generation that deserves better than the patterns we inherited. The cleaning help. The invisible son. The afterthought. I have been all of these things. And I have been so much more. I am Alex Sterling. I am a husband, a friend, a mentor, a success. I am a man who was told he didn't matter and chose to matter anyway. I am a survivor, a builder, a creator of worlds. And my story is not over. The sun is setting over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Sarah calls to me from the house, asking if I'm coming in for dinner. The dogs bark, eager for their food. I turn away from the waves and walk toward home, toward love, toward the life I built with my own hands. The cleaning help. I smile at the thought, and I keep walking.